Ukraine's CIA-trained intelligence agencies have assassinated dozens of Russians and Ukrainian collaborators since the start of Moscow's invasion. These operations have been cast as extreme measures Ukraine was forced to adopt in response to Russia's invasion last year. In reality, they represent capabilities that Ukraine's spy agencies have developed over nearly a decade, since Russia first seized Ukrainian territory in 2014, a period during which the services also forged deep new bonds with the CIA. The missions have involved elite teams of Ukrainian operatives drawn from directorates that were formed, trained, and equipped in close partnership with the CIA, according to current and former Ukrainian and U.S. officials. Since 2015, the CIA has spent tens of millions of dollars to transform Ukraine's Soviet-formed services into potent allies against Moscow, officials said. The agency has provided Ukraine with advanced surveillance systems, trained recruits at sites in Ukraine as well as the United States, built new headquarters for departments in Ukraine's military intelligence agency, and shared intelligence on a scale that would have been unimaginable before Russia illegally annexed Crimea and fomented a separatist war in eastern Ukraine. The CIA maintains a significant presence in Kiev. The extent of the CIA's involvement with Ukraine's security services has not previously been disclosed. U.S. intelligence officials stressed that the agency has had no involvement in targeted killing operations by Ukrainian agencies, and that its work has focused on bolstering those services' abilities to gather intelligence on a dangerous adversary. A senior intelligence official said that any potential operational concerns have been conveyed clearly to the Ukrainian services. Many of Ukraine's clandestine operations have had clear military objectives and contributed to the country's defense. The car bombing that killed Daria Dugina, however, underscored Ukraine's embrace of what officials in Kiev refer to as liquidations as a weapon of war. Over the past 20 months, the SBU and its military counterpart, the GUR, have carried out dozens of assassinations against Russian officials in occupied territories, alleged Ukrainian collaborators, military officers behind the front lines, and prominent war supporters deep inside Russia. Those killed include a former Russian submarine commander jogging in a park in the southern Russian city of Krasnodar, and a militant blogger at a cafe in St. Petersburg, according to Ukrainian and Western officials. Even so, officials acknowledged that boundaries were occasionally blurred. CIA officers in Kiev were made aware of some of Ukraine's more ambitious plans for strikes. In some cases, including the bombing of the Kerch Bridge, U.S. officials registered concerns. Ukraine's spies developed their own lines about which operations to discuss and which to keep under wraps. The CIA-Ukraine collaboration took root in the aftermath of 2014 political protests that prompted Ukraine's pro-Russian president Viktor Yanukovych to flee the country, followed by Russia's annexation of Crimea and its arming of separatists in the eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. The initial phases of cooperation were tentative, officials said, given concerns on both sides that Ukraine's services were still heavily penetrated by the FSB, the Russian agency that is the main successor to the KGB. To manage that security risk, the CIA worked with the SBU to create an entirely new directorate, officials said, one that would focus on so-called active measures operations against Russia and be insulated from other SBU departments. The new unit was prosaically dubbed the Fifth Directorate, to distinguish it from the four long-standing units of the SBU. A sixth directorate has since been added, officials said, to work with Britain's MI6 spy agency. The early missions focused on recruiting informants among Russia's proxy forces, as well as cyber and electronic eavesdropping measures, officials said. The SBU also began mounting sabotage operations and missions to capture separatist leaders and Ukrainian collaborators, some of whom were taken to secret detention sites. But the operations soon took a lethal turn. Over one 3-year stretch, at least half a dozen Russian operatives, high-ranking separatist commanders or collaborators, were killed in violence that was often attributed to internal score settling, but in reality was the work of the SBU. Among those killed was Yevgeny Zhilin, the leader of a pro-Russian militant group in eastern Ukraine who was gunned down in 2016 in a Moscow restaurant. A year later, a rebel commander known as Givi was killed in Donetsk as part of an operation in which a woman who accused him of rape was enlisted to plant a bomb at his side, according to a former official involved in the mission. Ukrainian officials said the country's turn to more lethal methods was driven by Russian aggression, atrocities attributed to its proxies, and desperation to find ways to weaken a more powerful adversary. Many also cited Russia's own alleged history of conducting assassinations in Kyiv. Even while helping to build the SBU's new directorate, the CIA embarked on a far more ambitious project with Ukraine's military intelligence service. With fewer than 5,000 employees, the GUR was a fraction of the size of the SBU and had a narrower focus on espionage and active measures operations against Russia. It also had a younger workforce with fewer holdovers from Soviet times, while the SBU was still perceived as penetrated by Russian intelligence. The CIA calculated that GUR was a smaller and more nimble organization where it could have more impact. The CIA helped the GUR acquire state-of-the-art surveillance and electronic eavesdropping systems. They included mobile equipment that could be placed along Russian-controlled lines in eastern Ukraine, but also software tools used to exploit the cell phones of Kremlin officials visiting occupied territory from Moscow. Ukrainian officers operated the systems, but everything gleaned was shared with the Americans. The new capabilities were transformative. In one day, they could intercept 250,000 to 300,000 separate communications from Russian military and FSB units. Ukraine's new intelligence capabilities proved valuable from the start of the war. The SBU, for example, obtained intelligence on high-value Russian targets, enabling strikes that killed several commanders and narrowly missed Russia's top-ranked officer, Valery Gerasimov. Over the past year, the security services missions have increasingly centered on targets not only behind enemy lines, but well into Russia. For the SBU, no target has been a higher priority than the Kerch Bridge that connects the Russian mainland to the annexed Crimean Peninsula. The bridge is a key military corridor, and also carries such symbolic significance to Putin that he presided over its inauguration in 2018. The SBU has hit the bridge twice over the past year, including an October 2022 bombing that killed 5 people and put a gaping hole in westbound traffic lanes. The two services overlap operationally to some degree, though officials said the SBU tends to pursue more complex missions with longer lead times, while the GUR tends to work at a faster tempo. Ukraine officials denied that either agency was directly involved in the September 2022 attack on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in the Baltic Sea, though US and other Western intelligence agencies have concluded that Ukraine was linked to the plot. The GUR has used its own fleet of drones to launch dozens of attacks on Russian soil, including strikes that have penetrated Russian air defenses to hit buildings in Moscow. Among them was a May 2023 operation that briefly set fire to a section of roof in the Kremlin. Those strikes have involved both long-range drones launched from Ukrainian territory, as well as teams of operatives and partisans working inside Russia. The way the CIA transformed the Ukrainian intelligence service is fascinating, and it is another success story in which David successfully fights Goliath for the second year.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.